Ogden's coming up for 3 for 3.
Yeah. You guys are sick of me probably by now. So the funny thing is, like, normally I put a bunch of ideas in for, presentations and stuff, thinking they'll maybe pick one, but like I was surprised.
I was like, he really wants to present 3 times.
And then I asked everybody else if they want to present, and they said, no, you go first. So I'm just kidding.
Well, I don't have to introduce him again, but it's Ogden Clark and then Mike Holt and Shannon.
And we're going to talk to you guys today about something that I think everybody probably in this area recently had to deal with the storm. And we're also going to have Shannon Cox from our public safety department, and Mike Holt. You guys have met him earlier today from our public works team, and they're going to talk about the GIS side of things. But I just first wanted to kind of show what we approached using our hub site with this year's storm season. So really on this slide, the only thing I really want to focus on is, like, we have, and you'll hear it over and over again, the pre-storm and post-storm messaging, right? So there's a lot of stuff you have to think about before a storm, a lot of things you have to think about after a storm. We really had to look at our data and kind of figure out how to communicate with the public during that. Another thing too is that you really have internal communications during crisis, and you have external communications, right? So those were the kind of things that I want to talk about today, that we're going to look at, and we're going to see how we tied those things together and gave a public-facing option or a public-facing solution to the public to help them deal with the information that they needed during a storm. But then we also had internal information and information that was valuable for our staff, our leadership, things like that. So the solution itself is, like we said earlier, a hub site. It can be found if you want to check it out. It's this mymanatee.org/storm. That'll take you there. And you'll have an opportunity to kind of dive a little bit deeper in there. What you're seeing there is just some screenshots, and really just to kind of show you that we're doing everything from road closures to shelters to the recovery information about where you can drop stuff off. Having that HTML option in Hub gives us the ability to really tailor the way it looks, what type of stuff we put in there, whether we want to add a PDF, all of those things can happen. And it can be tied right into your GIS data. So Hurricane Debby, August 3rd, we were hit by that storm. And really with that storm, I'm not even going to talk so much about the pre-storm part of it, because really the messaging was pretty traditional. We were coming at it the way that we typically had with most storms. But in the middle of that storm, we had an issue with our dam. The Lake Manatee Reservoir started to get too high. We had to let water out, and that actually created a new problem. We already had flooding in the area, but this actually exponentially increased the flooding. So this was a messaging that was almost happening during the storm and after the storm, that we were having to position and figure out a way to get static maps and information that we had, that we knew was relevant to the people out in the community, but we needed to be able to tell them that they were in a spot or they were in a bad place. So we had to very quickly turn that into an online thing that people could access, people could see from the public. During the storm, we didn't really publicize it the same way that we did later on. And we got criticized a little bit about our communications during this storm, especially because of what happened with the dam. And during that time, we still had 128,000 page views. So you had people going there, getting and accessing the information, but didn't necessarily mean that they were seeing the results or they were coming to us and saying, we still don't know about it. So fast forward, we got better about promoting the site. We started to draw more and more people's attention to it. As people criticized us here and there for what happened during Debby, we started to push more and more people here, educate more, and then we saw the results during Helene. 328,000. You're almost doubling what you had as far as usership. Now the storm was more serious, right? So you probably would expect that. You'd see more people on there. But really with that storm, that's another one that's really unique. Like I said, with the other storm, most of it was flooding caused due to rain. This was flooding caused due to storm surge, which means that the coastal communities were severely impacted. And most everybody else woke up that morning and just went to work and did everything else if they weren't out on one of the barrier islands. And then lastly, we got hit by Milton. So this was one that by this time, our pre and post storm messaging was pretty on point. At that time, we got very close to 600,000 page views. And at that time, we had more information up there. So this evolved over each one of those storms. And you'll get to hear a little bit about some of those tools and the teams and stuff that worked on those. But really, what I wanted to highlight is just the lessons that we learned during this communication process. And so this is just a really cool chart. You can see where the landfall happened on each of those days for Helene and for Milton. And really what I want to stress is that you had over 1 million people come to this site and see it. And one of the things that we learned was that we crashed the Esri server, and that's the Esri Online server. And I think, part of that could have been because all of the other regional areas were also putting out their evacuation notices. And I mean, what's funny about it is when that crash happened, that's the day we announced our mandatory evacuation. So to have these metrics, to be able to come back and see those things, and Mike's going to talk more about them because it lets you know what things you need to spend your time on before a storm or during a storm, and what you want to spend your time on afterwards. A lot of times, sometimes leadership will still kind of be wrapped up in what's going on from the pre-storm stuff, and you got to move them on to with this like literally completely drops off as far as usership and viewership. You're now no longer sandbags are important or whatever it may be. The other thing I want to stress is that you're going to get questions. So we as GIS professionals, we know this about the data, but we do encourage you to at least use your expertise and your knowledge to be able to, when you get a request or you just seem like, hey, this is something that is never going to go away, or we don't really know how to maintain it, you will get questions about those things. So if there's something you're not sure about putting out there, or you don't really sure, like, hey, how is this going to look in a couple of weeks? Don't put it up there, or at least figure that out. Ask those questions, find out what it is that you're trying to show and what's important in there. And then, like I said, they're going to talk a little bit more about the pre and post storm messaging. I think that that's something that you guys can take home back to your workplaces and things will be useful. The last thing that I wanted to say is that Hub was really adaptable for us. It allowed us to move with those shifting priorities. Whatever the case may be, you can see a picture of our EOC in there. We had those dashboards up. Those were real time. People were able to see, during recovery where things were open, what type of, we actually had used Survey 123. So you had a lot of survey data that was coming in as far as what damage had occurred. All that stuff was being shared. And then what it allowed us to do is really have that standardized message. So when you have external agencies and you have people that are other jurisdictions and things like that, that are basically saying, we're just going to send people to the Manatee County website because it's easier for us, and that's where we think the information is. That's when we knew that we were verified, that this was something that was valuable and that was being used by not just us, but other organizations, the Chamber of Commerce, places like that, that were also using this as a resource. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Shannon.
Hello, as Ogden said, I am Shannon Cox. I'm with Manatee County Public Safety. I have roughly 17 years of GIS experience. And although I am new to public safety as of April this year, I'm not new to emergency operations. I've been working emergency operations since Irma in 2017. So I've become very familiar with Manatee County's emergency operations and activations. So really quick, we'll just go over some basic operations with the GIS unit, which is a new unit with Manatee County. And this unit, typically we're doing 2 12-hour shifts during full activation so that we can have a continuous 24-hour operations. And I know I'm getting some chuckles from my counterpart in the audience because during Milton, we were on for 24 hours. So it doesn't always work out that way, but that's what our goal is to have 2 12-hour shifts with at least 2 GIS staff and a group supervisor on duty. Is it enter? Okay, and this is just some fun pictures. If you look to the right of the slide, you're going to see we have a couple of whiteboards in our GIS unit room, which is a room that we've newly acquired, and we've set it up with 4 plug-and-play workstations. All you have to do is just bring your laptop, and if you don't have one, we can try to acquire one for you, which we've had to do. But this is just an example of some of the operations that the GIS unit is running, and all of these are making it to us from Web EOC. The GIS unit has a board separated under ESF5, which is planning, and all of the requests from any emergency support function is going to be coming through Web EOC, and then we just watch the board, and whoever the group soup is, we try to get it up onto the board for everybody's knowledge, and as it's done, we just erase it from the board. That keeps our staff out of Web EOC so that they're not having to constantly monitor it, and then we just take over that responsibility. All right, so with GIS staffing, this is something that, just like communication, how the communication has evolved with the Public Information Office, staffing has evolved throughout this storm season. As I said, the GIS unit is a new unit within Manatee County, and during Debby, we did not have that unit, and we were really scrambling with it, and with the administration team who was fresh off of a UC and saw all the technology that GIS could bring and all of that return on investment. They were like, where's the GIS? Where's the GIS? So during Debby, it was kind of a scramble to activate GIS, and we had some growing pains there. However, after Debby, administration did create the GIS unit with some management involved, and we started that by sending out a survey 123 to type and categorize our GIS analysts. We were basically trying to identify those newer employees that could be used for like data entry and not high level analytic work. And then the analysts that could do the analytic work. And then those senior employees or senior analysts that could either be group supervisors or they could help to lead the teams. I did want to mention also with the, as it morphed through time, that even our print maps increased through time. We did roughly 3,500 print maps throughout the 3 different events. And those were in a variety of size from 11 by 17 all the way up to 36 by 48. But Milton took the cake with 3,142 print maps made during Milton. And this is not to include the plethora of dashboards and online applications that were created for each of these events. So I think that Mike also wants to touch on the staffing, but the one more thing that I had was our general reason for this whole unit is to support leadership. And we do this by increasing situational awareness within our EOC and ensuring that all of our decision makers and our leadership are working from a common operating picture. So I'll turn it over to Mike.
So yeah, going into GIS staffing when you're in an EOC environment, and I mean, if this is anyone that's ever been involved in ICS activation and ICS kind of with a workflow, there is a GIS. There's a position there is like GIS as recognized when it comes to ICS. Okay, what we and you know it wasn't really anyone's fault. I think everybody, as I've mentioned in previous presentations, all of us were trying to do the right thing and the best we could in our own kind of department roles. What we lacked was coming together and doing a unified support for county leadership and emergency management. Now, I know that this model may not be representative of every single group agency, you know, here. For us, though, we have definitely grown into having GIS embedded operationally within the different departments and divisions. Okay, so that's great. But what happens when you come into an ICS or EOC activation? All those silos need to go away, and everyone needs to kind of come together into, you know, I use the term inter-department, interagency, an inter-department kind of team that comes together, responds to one chain of command. You sever ties with your old bosses. Guess what? I know you were my director every other day of the week, but today I'm reporting to emergency management, and we're working through that. If you have a request from me, go to the proper channels using ICS protocol, and then it'll come to me and we'll dish it up. That's the only way to keep it clean and organized. You can see that we took GIS analysts and just, I mean, not even necessarily analysts, but just folks that understood GIS or were just workers, people that could just do a job, just do the mission. We brought them together, and really we had an amazing team. It really, for as stressful as this past summer was, it really was a really cool experience. It brought me back. It reminded me about my great times being back in the military and doing really meaningful deployments and operations. It was really cool. But the big thing that, and I know Shannon already mentioned it, but down here, emphasis on all phases. This means that egos have to go away. All roles are important. And I got to be honest, probably one of the most critical role that cannot be, kind of brushed aside is just data entry. Data entry in an emergency kind of environment is so critical. Road closures. Okay. So this is a prime example. Road closures is when they start coming in, they come in quick. It'll be dead. And I know Ryan knows all about this. It was a dead night. We said, hey, good night. We'll see you in the morning. And the next thing I woke up, I was pretty early in the morning and he was just sitting there frazzled and they had punched in, I don't know how many hundreds of road closures. Because when roads start coming in, when our first in teams go out there and information starts to flow back into the EOC about roads that are no longer passable, guess what? They're all coming in and they're all getting reported at once. And you're trying to sit there and process this out. Now, do you need a GIS analyst to do that? No, you just need somebody that can literally hear and put in information, okay? So where we got better at this was saying, all right, rather than making this a GIS task, let's build a GIS tool or use a GIS tool where we can put the power into the ESF tables, the folks that are getting the reports. Ideally, in my vision, I would like for a year or two from now, put these tools in the hands of the field officers. Having I'm getting some scope creep here, but getting information into the field users so that they can be able to put it in so that we don't have to put it in. We're just there kind of doing quality control and quality assurance, but allowing your field kind of collectors to put in authoritative information. Save that time. We don't need to be playing the telephone game in the middle of an EOC. If we over-report on a road closure, so be it. We'll open it back up. But it's better to over-report in some circumstances than to under-report. But data entry, I can't overemphasize enough. It can't just be, oh yeah, and then data entry. Like you probably need to emphasize in making sure that we have the bodies and dedicated personnel and to take into consideration that guess what? Anyone that might be operating remote in an emergency situation, you're probably going to lose them at some point in the night. Whether it be the best power source, the best Wi-Fi, the best anything, even all those things considered, guess what? For Hurricane Debby, I got a text on my phone that, hey, the dam is about to breach and you're in the middle of the zone. So I had power and I had Wi-Fi, but guess what? I had to get my family, we had to haul ass out of there. So definitely don't plan on anybody remote staying remote. Bodies in office is really the only guarantee that you have support on site. Got more? I do got more. See, you guys are stuck with me. I was worried. All right, so for pre-storm, this actually is a great way, segue into what we operate as blue sky, gray sky, okay? Blue sky operations being your everyday normal operations that you might operate under, go out the window and change during gray sky or emergency situations. Case in point with road closures. When we get a road closure or a permit request during normal blue sky operations, there's a process that goes in. The permit comes in, they design the MOT, the detour, it's approved, signage is put out there, all these things are gone through, okay? That's all well and good, great, we have a process for that. Again, in an emergency situation, we don't have time, nor do we have the manpower, nor is that really even prudent. Again, when a sheriff's deputy calls in and says, hey, there's wires down, there's a tree down, there's a car flipped over, or whatever it might be, when we get those reports in from the field that something is closed, nobody is going out there saying, well, are you sure? No, we're just going to close it. We're going to shut it down. We're going to close it. We're going to track it in the systems that we need to take place, okay? So understanding that your blue sky operations, while they may kind of relate, they don't necessarily one-for-one translate over into emergency, and you have to make sure that you scale them appropriately. Some of these things, when we go into pre-storm, we're looking at phase of awareness, preparation, and prevention. We're guessing just as much as the public. Granted, we have a little bit more information, we've been through this more, but the public is literally looking for reassurances. They have no idea what's going on. They have no idea where this storm is going. Right now, I guarantee you, it's maybe people are a little bit callous from after this year. Everyone's got some storm fatigue, but I mean, there are people right now that are constantly looking for those updates. They're looking to see what's going on. And as things change, we had to be there to make sure that we were keeping them comfortable, letting them know, okay, this looks like it's going to be an impactful event. Here are sandbag sites. As sandbag sites open up, are we making sure that we're pushing that information out quickly and efficiently, letting people know where those sandbag sites are. That map right there is actually a prime location, is a prime example of where they can go to see the sandbag sites. Are they using that for their navigation needs? Probably not. Nobody's going to go on to an ArcGIS dashboard to get turn-by-turn navigation, more than likely. So what we did was we put directions in there that highlighted it straight from Google and Apple Maps. So you open that in your phone, which is predominantly what people use nowadays as mobile devices, not necessarily desktops, but using that, pushing that link, and then going directly into a Google or an Apple directions in your Apple Maps for actual direction-based turn-by-turn. Pre-storm, more examples. I think it was mentioned earlier. The other group was saying how they tie in a lot of live data with regards to the National Weather Service. We do the same thing, our local kind of area warnings, as well as the National Weather Service and hurricane forecasting. We also have evacuation levels and routes, all the way down to you type in your address in there. You got a lot of new transplants that honestly have yet to experience a storm season like we did this year. So people had no idea what an evacuation level was. You've got the old salts that have been here their whole lives, and they're like, yeah, unless it's a Cat 4, I'm not leaving. And then you got people that have just come here from Buffalo, New York, that are absolutely losing their mind. So you got to be able to meet both sides of the aisle there. But we have all these solutions that are on there, all in the same place, and all kind of tiered out on our hub site, that as this storm goes from pre-storm to post-storm, we're kind of prioritizing what should be the emphasis. Sandbags, evacuation sites, shelters, those are the things that we want to pop out to the audience when they first go on our site. We get into post-storm. Now what are we worried about? Response, recovery, reassurance, right? We've gone through all the preparations that's possible. More than likely, sandbags is no longer a concern. If you didn't get flooded, you're probably, we got to move that out of the way. But now we're looking at road closures. Now we're looking at recovery sites. Now we're looking at, hey, shelters are still open. There in Manatee County, when we started experiencing post-storm flooding in the Myakka River Basin, that was a huge concern. Flooding actually became an issue after the storm. So a lot of those things start popping up. And once again, having that hub site still be the quick redirect, which the county was still pushing out. It was what, manatee.org/storm, right? Very simple URL that no matter what, it was going to redirect them to our site, that you weren't going to get lost down the rabbit trail or the rabbit hole of a typical website. This one actually was an all-inclusive. One example, I think we got our point of distribution locations, disaster recovery center, small business development centers. So interestingly enough, this when you're sitting there at night, and it's the 11th hour of the shift at the EOC, and you're just trying to figure out, all right, what are they going to ask us about tomorrow? Really what we did was we grabbed every single possible thing that might come up, and we made a quote unquote digital twin of it. We geocoded it and we made it a feature class, not knowing if it was going to get asked for, but hey, more than likely someone's going to ask for it, or we're going to need to put it on a map. It's got a spatial location, it's got attributes. Let's get it in there. So we've gotten to a point now where I can't even, you could probably just mention a feature class or a concept or a scope or something, and we probably have done it from the past couple storms. It's probably in there, just sitting there waiting to be dusted off and pushed out to the public. Yeah. Some other examples, and again, this really isn't anything new. Other groups, counties, and local governments are doing this, but this is just our example. On the left is our debris haulers. I swear the storm had barely made it by within 8 hours, and we were getting calls to 311. Hey, when are you guys going to come pick up our storm debris? You know, that kind of stuff. It's like, we're okay, but roger that. You know what I mean? Like it's our duty to the citizens to provide that information as soon as we can. So our utilities department did an awesome job with this dashboard on being able to punch out information in terms of, hey, this is the amount of work that we've done so far, and this is the amount of work that we're going to do. Now, they did a lot of aggregation so that you don't have people saying, oh, was my house next? No, we're kind of doing zones. We're leaving a little bit for imagination. But this does show the public that, hey, we are progressing. We are making progress. From one day to the next, there is a quantitative change. The map on the right is a dashboard for signs with Hurricane Milton. When we have events like that are high wind, as you can imagine, you come out the next day and every single traffic sign is down, broken, bent, or on its side. With that, we have about 63,000 signs in Manatee County. And when I say that, I don't mean 63,000 posts. I mean 63,000 actual signs. So stacks of 4 or 5 that you might see on a post. But there's like over 60,000 signs that need to be inspected and verified if they even still exist. All right. Not to mention you're on the clock because with emergency funding, contractor is coming in. The county doesn't have that capability to be able to fix those signs within a rapid time frame, considering the amount of damage. So we pushed out a lot of information. We used our inherent asset management system to push out basically volunteer employees to go out, and we gave them grids to go out to different signs that they knew were there. They went to them using field maps. They went to the sign, took a before picture. We gave them 3 codes, either, nothing needed, repair, replace. That's it. That was tied in directly to our existing feature class for sign inventory that we didn't break anything. We were still able to use it with our CityWorks asset management system for our normal blue sky work orders. But from an emergency standpoint, we now had a way to tie current Milton, post-Milton status to our inventory that if needed, we could punch out to a vendor or a contractor for surge operations and repairs. I think that's about it. There on the right, I'll quick it up here. There on the right, that's actually our Esri road closure solution. A big push that I kind of a selling point that I want to make for that, if anyone here is looking for a road closure solution, is that this actually ties into the Esri map community, meaning that it will, if you follow the process that's outlined in the solution, it will tie you into the map community that when these updates are put in and you're appropriately registered, they will update on the Living Atlas. Esri is also in the works for, I don't work for Esri, I'm just saying this is what's been told to me, talk to the Esri folks, but the Esri is actually in the works with coordinating with major navigation partners to make this a transfer of information that when your when your road closure data is entered into the solution, there's a time gap, but it's being automatically pushed out to these navigation partners, which I know for us is a huge thing because we're tired of putting in road closures in 5 different systems and notifying different navigation partners. Having a one single stop solution would be fantastic. So we were very excited and hoping that that kind of materializes here in the next year. Esri hasn't made an official announcement, so. But no, very excited about it, and it looks very promising. That's it. I'm gonna let you guys finish.
Yeah, and honestly, just one thing I wanted to just address because I forgot about it. I was talking about it with Shannon real quick. How many of you guys have a 311 process like within your county organization? Okay, so 311 is kind of like 911, but 311, you call it, you can basically ask questions. During a storm, that gears up, and they took like 20,000 calls or something throughout. So one of the key things that we didn't even think about when we were developing this was that became the central place for those 311 call takers to basically, the question was, where's the nearest shelter, or where's the sandbag site, or after the storm, it was, where's a recovery site, or where can I get this, where can I get that? Having that in one place for somebody who's sitting there on their computer taking calls, they were able to get the answers for people and be able to provide them directions, whatever they needed, all from that tool right there. So that was just another something. It was like a happy accident, I guess you could say, after the fact.
And it was standardized. I mean, right? Because even if our information, I'm not saying that's what we were going for, but even if our information on the hub site was maybe incorrect or we'd messed something up, okay, great. At least we're uniformly incorrect, or at least uniformly on the same page. We don't have 311 reporting one thing, maps reporting another, public affairs reporting something else. Everything was consolidated. And if we were going to be wrong, we're all going to be wrong together.
Yeah. Two more things I'll just note since they're up there on the screen. We dealt with 4 different jurisdictions out on our barrier islands. And to Mike's point, sometimes we would push out a message and it would be accurate for one of those jurisdictions, but it wouldn't be accurate for all the jurisdictions. Some of them were communicating with us, some of them weren't communicating with us. So finally got to a point with Hub where they have a social media tool. So I was able to put the social media page for all 4 of those jurisdictions up there because that's where they were pushing all their information out. And it went from a job that after Helene, we actually had our own island recovery page that we adapted and put out there. Once I put that up there, I don't have to worry about that as much anymore. So you can kind of take things off your plate. The last thing is a lot of state resources and things that, this is, the state uses this hub site as a way to condense all their data. And so that's kind of why we followed that model. But at the state level, you've got things like power outages and things like just tons of state resources, whether it's stream gauges, things like that. We're able to pull all that data in and be able to put it out to the public, and it allows you to be able to adapt. But what questions do you guys have? I know this is, yeah, go ahead.
On the signs, you said, I forget how many you said. A lot.
Over 60,000 individual signs.
Do
Yes,
you
ma'am.
have a time limit you want those all looked at by, or do you guys put that out there?
So my director said ASAP, right? Like, and I'm kind of going off of that. Now, luckily, the public works director, I'm very grateful in that he's very much realistic in that. That's great that that's what you want. And all the GIS solutions that I push out are great, but someone still has to be out there to do it, right? So I would say that our general, what we've averaged over so the last major event that was similar to this was Ian. Ian, the next day, signs were down. It was almost identical, kind of that approach to it. Getting at least a good handle on the prioritizations of stop signs, number one, right? Stop signs are the first thing. A sandhill crane crossing sign is probably lower priority. Stop signs, first priority. Then we start getting into like school and all of those things. I don't want to give a number out because I've never really been told, hey, it has to be done by this time. It's just the understanding like, hey, this needs to be done as quickly as possible. Now, in order to do that, and I will say a lesson learned from Ian, I was a brand new GIS analyst to the county, not really understanding the workflow or what was going on. I generated a Survey 123 app for a bunch of volunteers to go out and do. Now, I can tell you that I collected data, but there was no way to tie it in to an existing inventory of both unique facility IDs or even XY coordinates that matched, right? That was rough. Okay, I would not recommend it. So now we have a package, like I have a solution ready to go. I have a feature class that has been copied from our, hey, at any given point prior to the storm season, here's our sign inventory. I will take that, I'll copy it and just put it off to the side and get it ready. And I'll add another field to it saying, hey, hurricane stats. That's all I'm really worried about. And make sure that attachments are ready. And it sits there and it's just waiting. And as soon as my director says, hey, we're doing, operation, oh crap, like everybody get out there. That's when I'm kicking out that, and I will say field maps is a godsend, so nice.
So is that being live?
Yes. So it's live. And on that dashboard, so that dashboard actually that I showed a slide back, that was the completion percentages. So this is a dashboard. Yeah, so this is a dashboard that I fed to the director, our deputy county administrator, letting the commissioners, letting them all see, hey, listen, because again, a lot of times it's just the quantitative change and them being able to grasp, hey, we're at 83% complete, that kind of thing. But that was just a view of just the completions. Plus, here's the other funny thing about this. You see all those little green dots? Those green dots are signs that the inspectors found that weren't even on our inventory. So a nature of development is that you've got signs being added to your inventory that haven't even technically been entered into the inventory, but a stop sign is a stop sign and needs to be corrected. So there's a lot of layers to that onion.
Do you have any recommendations for working with your counterparts at the municipal level with cities? Because they may not be at the same level of ICS or within the EOC to make sure that you're getting information back.
Getting plugged in,
that
be
you're
at the
looking for.
EOC.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring them in.
To be honest, we have suggested that they have representation in the EOC, and that keeps them plugged into the information that's flowing. Because even outside of briefings, there's a lot of information that flows through an EOC, and in our EOC, nobody is afraid to talk to another person. So there's a lot of getting up, walking across the room, communicating, and then going back. So there is a lot of information flow, and because of that, we have suggested that our municipal partners have a representation in the EOC.
Sneaker net.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's good old fashioned sneaker. Go ahead, Ashley.
We had an online question. They said that you guys mentioned something about not having an EOC team formed for Debby. Did you not have any team configured before that? When was your hub constructed?
So I'll have to take partial
Yeah, you can do that one.
fault for that. And that is because, as I said, I do have the experience with working with the emergency operations. And that was because I was the planning section chief. Now, as the planning section chief and also having a GIS background, it was kind of my understanding that we were supposed to let jobs come to us, or that we were supposed to seek jobs out, like just be listening and figure out those jobs. And because that we didn't have a really good workflow whenever it came to activating GIS, because my approach had always been, as the planning section chief, to leave GIS assets where they lay. And if we get a request, which we really had not gotten a whole lot of GIS requests until this storm season, but leave them in their department where they belong to, let them work for their department as a GIS analyst. And if we get a request for any data that is department specific, I would just forward that request to them. Now, as I said, with all of the administration just coming from the UC and they saw what GIS could do, they wanted to see it in action. So no, we did not have a unit. And like I said, I do have to take a little bit of fault for that because I didn't try to push innovation. However, it is working now, and we are constantly evolving how we do our, yeah, because even for position titles, which we're still trying to work out, like for Helene, Mike and I were technical leads, A shift, B shift. And then for Milton, we were group soups, A shift, B shift. So we're still trying to work it out, but that was really the reason prior.
I'm gonna say that Shannon is falling on a sword that's not needed, because I will say that this storm season, Shannon has overseen the overhauling and revolutionizing and modernization of GIS in Manatee County. And I will say that the kind of the lack of preparation or the compartmentalization and not wanting to talk to each other that existed in our predecessors, those walls have come crumbling down, and it's all because of Shannon. So I appreciate that she's saying that, but we wouldn't be as efficient as we are today without Shannon, and we wouldn't have had the success that we've had. So that's totally unnecessary.
And I have to give that to my leadership, because without my, without my leadership, the new leadership that I have, I wouldn't be able to do this job, because they trust me. They trust me as a subject matter expert. And whenever I say that something can or cannot be done, they say, okay, thank you. So it's leadership too.
You have another question?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Sure.
On your personnel shift changes, where you're hosting feature services, web-based applications, for those who are coming into the role another, what did you do to ensure that they had the ability to SEMA changes and app design changes and such?
We have a Teams hub.
Yeah, well, so Teams Hub, number one, right? So going back to your pass down, right? Between watches and shifts, pass downs is super important. Luckily, we had so many different experiences coming into this and people with their specialties. But from one shift to another, one of the analysts had created an entire Teams channel with notebook and pass downs and notes and links and URLs, and anything that had been created was there and ready to go. Now, I think you're talking more about maybe permissions and schema and kind of like the standards like that. I got to be honest, some of it was on the fly, and it's going to be no matter what. There's just every storm was different. And even though we experienced 3 of what we would probably see at any given point, 3 random storms, they were all different. They were all little small nuances. They were all just certain priorities that were different. My biggest recommendation for that is to make sure beforehand, and I'm not talking about when the storm is T-2 days away, well beforehand, establishing your roles and permissions in your groups in your WebGIS online, right? So we were very heavy on that, establishing that we had our GIS groups were a part of certain groups. We had groups already created for emergency management. We had a named hurricane event that, again, everybody was in there. We verified permissions for not even just GIS, but shared folders, plotters, like you'd be surprised how many things, and people will slip through the cracks and not having permissions on things. But we kind of adapted and did the best we can. I will say in our after action report after this season, if it ever does end, after our after action report is going to be that, like making sure that we revisit it several times throughout the next year to be like, hey, where are we on permissions, roles, schema, standardization, even like your maps, right? From one shift to the next, one shift might design a map and have cartography standards one way, and the next person comes in and goes, oh, I use the black base map and, in Firefly. It's like, no, we got to keep things kind of standard. So establishing that well beforehand, the best you can, but also understanding that when you're in the meat of it, it's going to have to be some flex. But that fell onto the leads, right, for those shifts, that it was up to them to make those decisions to say, hey, let's go with this. And then they were the ones that were kind of communicating and leading their individual respective teams.
Were you finding that you were going the approach of changing layer ownerships and map ownerships, or were you using update share groups?
Yep. So shared groups.
Everybody's on that group.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I can only think of really one instance where it was an ownership issue and somebody had to share ownership with me so that an edit could be made because nobody from their team was available. And that was with lift stations with our utilities team. So no, it wasn't shelters. No, that was another snafu. So they just signed ownership over to me or added me as an editor on the app, and then we were able to accomplish what needed to be done. Now, what Ogden was just, we had a little snafu with shelters. We were editing shelters based off of what was in WebEOC, and we mismarked a shelter being open, our special needs shelter, which is typically hidden from the public because it's specifically for special needs. So we, as a GIS unit, made the decision that perhaps maybe we should not be controlling the shelter, and the shelter app, and we should hand it over to Public Information Office, because they're the ones that's pushing the information out to the public, and they're the ones that need the information to be accurate. So we handed it off to them, and then we didn't have any issues with that anymore.
We've got one more online question, and then we're gonna move on to our map contest and closing session. The question online is, how did you keep the road closure info up to date when the road is no longer closed? Were you being fed that info in some way to update the attribute symbology and what was?
It's not a smooth going back.
Okay, yeah. So just as quickly as the information comes in for road closures, expect the exact opposite for information coming in regarding them being open. Okay. And that gets tough. But it's a little bit out of your hands. You're only as good as the information that's coming back in. Now, I will say our field staff, and we've got some field managers that are really good about understanding, like, hey, we're waiting on that information, and them getting their staff out there to, hey, nope, let's verify, make sure this road is closed, and then reporting it back to us. Now, this is also another reason why, and we're still kind of in the works and negotiating this, because this is a control thing, is I believe that field staff should have more authority to be able to both open and close roads, okay? With some level of quality control and quality assurance, obviously. Not everyone necessarily agrees with me, and that's fine, but that we're trying to find that happy medium, because you can go a long time where you're like, hey, what is the status on this road? Like what are we doing with this? Luckily though, because I will say Hub and having our road closures out there for the public, it doesn't really get forgotten. So yeah, it keeps us honest. And because people know that like our leadership is looking at it, they want it removed and gone as quickly as we do. So I will say, like, there is some pluses with that, but yeah, that can be frustrating. And I'm not saying that we have it completely nailed down. You just got to keep nice with people and keep asking nicely.
Thank you guys very much.